Hey guys, it's Yuta. So I think many of you guys are kind of stuck at home because you're practicing social distancing and being a responsible global citizen. But spending a lot of time inside and not meeting your friends can be stressful. And maybe many of you guys are planning to go to Japan but had to cancel. And you know what? That sucks. And I'm sorry you had to cancel the trip. But when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And in your case, your lemonade might be learning Japanese. Because if you think about it, if you want to come to Japan, it doesn't really matter if you want to come for a holiday or if you want to live in Japan. Speaking Japanese will make a huge difference. Of course, you can get by even if you don't speak Japanese. But wouldn't it be more fun if you could order food in Japanese or buy things in Japanese? Or maybe you could even have conversations with ordinary Japanese people who don't speak other languages and make friends with them. You could even find a girlfriend or boyfriend. And it will be much more fun because you could basically talk to anybody. You wouldn't have to try hard to find somebody who speaks English or talk to a non-human like Cube. So if you don't already speak Japanese, now you have the time to learn Japanese before your trip so that you can make the most out of your trip. So this is your chance to learn Japanese. And maybe some of you guys will say, oh, I don't really know how to learn or where to start. So in this video, I'm going to give you some tips. And I don't want any excuses because I was able to learn English without having teachers or native speakers to talk to. And back then, there was no YouTube or smartphone apps. So you can definitely do it. Now, where to start? Well, apart from the obvious choice of subscribing to my free email group by clicking the link in the description and get my Japanese lessons where I teach you real Japanese that real Japanese people speak because textbooks can be unnatural and old-fashioned. But apart from that, there's many things you can do. By the way, some people say that they don't get my email lessons. Please check your spam folder because they don't always deliver my emails to you. And if that doesn't work, try a different email address. So I will give you some tips based on your level. First, beginners. If you are a complete beginner, I suggest that you learn hiragana and katakana along with the pronunciation. If you are motivated, you could learn them in a couple of weeks. But it doesn't really matter how much time it takes. The most important thing is learning them. You could technically write Japanese in the Latin alphabet, which is called Romaji, but nobody uses that in Japan. And it will be such a hassle to read Romaji for us. Many of us don't even bother reading the text if it's written in the Latin alphabet. So if you want to communicate with Japanese people, learning hiragana and katakana is very important. You can worry about kanji later because there's so many of them. And you can learn kanji later because as long as it's written in hiragana and katakana, it's like our mind automatically read them without really trying. And writing everything in hiragana and katakana is much better than writing everything in Romaji. So learn hiragana and katakana first. Now, if you are already learning Japanese and at an intermediate level, one of the best things you can do is learning common words. Vocabulary is power. And I will give you an example. 政府は12日に旅行制限について話し合った。Now, I think most of you guys didn't understand that sentence, unless you are already at an advanced level. But if you know the words, let's see what will happen. The government, 12th, travel restriction, discussed. And now you can probably guess the sentence means the government discussed travel restrictions on the 12th. And you can probably guess even though you might not understand the grammar. So knowing words is powerful. And have you heard of the 20-80 rule? It basically means 20% of the input is responsible for 80% of the outcome. And people often talk about this rule in the context of productivity. And you can find many real-life examples. For example, 20% of the employees are responsible for 80% of the revenue. 80% of the crimes are committed by 20% of the population. 20% of drivers cause 80% of all accidents. And this also applies to languages. The most frequently used 20% of the words account for 80% of the words that people use. In other words, if you learn 20% of the words, you will understand 80% of daily conversations. So it's gonna be a pretty good deal. But the next question is, how do you learn words? Now, the best way of learning vocabulary is one that works for you. But I can give you some advice based on what works for me. First, I've never had success just remembering definitions, like one word and one definition type of thing. So I always try remembering words in the sentence. Not only is it easier for you to remember, you can also learn how to use words in the right context. So learn words in context. And my second tip is, don't try to learn many words at once. So many times I've tried to learn thousands of words with an app or website or books, and I was never successful. Well, at first I was very motivated, but after a couple of weeks I just lost interest. But what worked for me instead is learning a small number of words at a time. For example, 10, 20 or 30 words. And if you finish remembering these words, you can move on to the next chunk. And this approach works far better to me. So maybe it will work for you too. So that was my advice for intermediate people. Now let's talk about advanced learners. And this is where you need a lot of input. You need to immerse yourself in Japanese. But there's a couple of things I want to talk about. First, don't try materials that are too hard for you. Choose something that's easy enough for you to understand. Now you've got Netflix, books, YouTube, there's just so many things you can choose from. You can even use my interview videos. And if you want to use my interview videos, listen to them first without looking at the subtitles, and then read the subtitles to check how much you understood. And you can actually use anime. Anime is perfectly fine as long as you don't only use anime. Because anime, TV dramas, and films, fictional characters don't quite speak like real-life Japanese people. How anime characters speak Japanese is different from how we, real-life Japanese people, speak Japanese. So you have to be careful, but you can still use anime. And if you want to learn how actual Japanese people today actually speak, because that's the kind of stuff that textbooks can't teach you because they can be unnatural and old-fashioned. I can send you some Japanese lessons by email, so click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. Alright, see you guys soon. またね